everybody. I'm Chad Eckert. It's not Eric Martins today, but you're still watching the Fantasy Golf Pod, and it is Saturday mornings, April 18th. I'm not drinking beer yet. I'm having my coffee. Like I said, it's early.
Cheers.
Cheers to that. We're still doing interviews, though. This is because there are no sports. We're still waiting on them to come back, and therefore we're trying to get better at DFS before we start playing it again. And how have we been doing that? We've been chatting with people to get to know their processes. And today, we have a person, but we have a person who runs a business that helps you become a better DFS player. That business is FanShare Sports, and that person is Andrew Rutherford right here with us today, the founder. Andrew, what's up, dude?
Not much, Chad. How are you?
Well, good. Welcome to the pod. We talk about this every Tuesday. This is what we do. We talk about how vital ownership is. We try to speculate. We try to use your website. We try to use other information, try to gather to know who the popular plays are. I'm excited to talk to you because this is like a serious service that you provide. You provide very helpful, but why is ownership so important, and why did you start FanShare Sports?
Those are two very, very interesting questions with different answers. So let's start with why we started and what we set out to do in the first place, which is not what FanShare has turned into. But I think what it's turned into is, I think, more valuable than what we had in the first place. So when we built FanShare, we wanted to be a social platform for DFS. And the concept was sort of based on a couple of things we had seen in the investing space. So day traders use, different apps and kind of aggregate news sources to make trades and to get investing information. And so we said, well, that's kind of interesting. And we saw some parallels between investing in stocks and investing in, DFS. And so, we built this fairly basic, what you now know as our news feed. But, day one, that was actually kind of like a comment feed. So users could come on, post comments, share links. The only problem was we didn't have any users. So it was imagine Twitter without any users, right? It was just like an empty shell. Nothing was going on. So my brother, who's my co-founder, Devin, and I, we would hop in there every week and post some links and just do anything we could to stimulate conversation, right? We might have had 50, 100 users, and there was just nothing going on. So eventually...
No, wait, what year was this? This is like a couple years ago, you're saying?
It's like 2015.
Oh, okay. So a while ago. Okay.
Yeah. And eventually we sort of, we were posting so much content. And one day, and I got to credit Pat Mayo for this, but I was sitting in my kitchen one day and I started getting all these emails like ping, 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 new user. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I thought we got hacked, right? And all these people started signing up for the site. And I'm like, what? I just had no idea. And we got like 300 or 400 users signed up. And, the next day, I think I was listening to Pat's podcast. It was around the British Open. He's like, I got to shout out FanShare Sports. They nailed it on Adam Scott at the British Open, his ownership. They said he was going to be chalky. I was like, what's he talking about?
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I think I had sent him a couple of tweets or something. So anyways, Pat says, you got to check out FanShare. They aggregate DFS content, and, that's really useful for projecting ownership. And I said, well, maybe my brother and I said, well, that's not really what we do, but maybe that is what we should be doing.
Dude, so that's amazing.
We did a full-on pivot, and we said, yeah, there is value in this. I mean, Pat at the time and still is, kind of the preeminent voice in DFS golf. And we said, well, if he sees value in this and, he thinks this is what we're all about, then maybe this is what, we should do. So, since then we kind of, crafted the product around the curation and the aggregation of content and, being able to identify trends and popular plays and ownership is kind of a byproduct of that. Right. But, I think at that point, the idea was still to have, and whether it's a social platform or, us aggregating the content, it's a centralized platform with a ton of information, a ton of curated content. So you can kind of go to one site and then, kind of sift through what people are saying and navigate from there, right? I mean, as you know, there's so much great DFS content out there, and, we're just hoping we can make it more discoverable for the everyday player.
So have you always just done golf? Because I know you added some sports. I mean, was it like we're like into golf, so we're just going to get golf info? Or is it because Mayo tweeted at or told people to go follow it, and then you're like, oh, Mayo's a golf guy, let's go focus that?
We actually started with football.
Okay.
I think that was 2015. And, nothing was really going on during football season, at least not for us. And then when football ended, we were like, oh, now what are we going to do?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Site just going to sit here, and we're like, let's add golf.
Let's go back to the reason. Okay, you say you were trying to get information to help you basically kind of like day traders do. Is this your background? Are you a trader? Are you a stock guy or math guy?
I mean, I would consider investing in stocks more of a hobby. I mean, I am a math guy. I'm an accountant. So in my previous life and somewhat, still from a consulting perspective, I'm a forensic accountant. So
yeah, I did do some stalking on LinkedIn of your background, and it looks kind of interesting. Like you have a very interesting job, including one that you spent 8 years in the Cayman Islands. That's got to be fun.
Yeah, it's taken me to some pretty interesting places.
So wait, what's it like to live in Cayman Islands? I went there on vacation when I was like in a youth. My dad and mom brought me there, but like, what's it like because that's an amazing experience, a vacation. But is it the same to work in the Cayman Islands?
It's pretty great. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It's
you spent 8 years there, so it's got to be decent.
Yeah, it was pretty nice. Yeah, I mean, it's a small place, a very social place. You kind of, one of these places where everybody and everybody's out. So, the flip side of that is you gotta be careful what you say when you're out, and you're looking over your shoulder at the restaurant when you're having a conversation. But yeah, no, it's great. I mean,
so now you went from the warmth of the Cayman Islands to the snow and I'm wearing a jacket because it's not that warm here in Minnesota. You're in Canada, right?
Yeah, back to the frozen tundra. So yeah, when our daughter was born, we made the decision to get back to reality. So yeah, plenty of winter days. We second guessed that, but here we are.
So then 5 years ago, you decided I'm going to do a fantasy sports information gathering business. Kind of pivoted as you learned the market was more towards projecting ownership, which I did a whole pod on this, like why ownership is important. But from the guy himself who started this, why is ownership important? Why do we care? Why should we sign up to learn about ownership?
My answer to that has always been, at the most basic level, you can't win a GPP if you have the same lineup as everybody else, right? So the question for me is not just why it's important, but how it's important and how to use it, right? So sometimes accused isn't the right word, but you might think that we're sort of anti chalk all the time, right? Which is not the case. So there's obviously good chalk and bad chalk. Especially
we talked to people about this the last couple of weeks. I mean, there's ways to use chalk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but recognizing and knowing and learning who the random chalk is and who the chalk that's bad chalk is, that's up to you to kind of decide, the user, the player. But your site allows at least some information. Now, how does it work exactly? How does FanShare gather the information? Is it a computer algorithm? I know you use tags. That's where each golfer is assigned a tag if the internet says something about it. How the heck do you do that? That seems insane. I'm not a computer person at all, so you got to explain.
Yeah, well, I won't get into all the secret sauce, but
right, don't do that. No. But
what I will say is that it's not quite as seamless and automated as most people. Most people think there's this super sophisticated AI in the background, and we are.
Yeah, there's like this spider that's crawling over the world, and it's like
we want to get there, and we're working on that. It's not just as simple as scraping all this information and putting it in the black box and it spits out these perfect projections, right? Because it's kind of like, depends who's saying what. Some guys in the industry obviously are going to have more influence when it comes to backing a guy. It also depends on who that golfer is, right? Often in PGA, I think we live in this little bubble where, who's the guy?
The chalk name that's always chalk, like Joel Damon or somebody?
Yeah, like a Joel Damon or like a
or a
guy
Homa.
who, he'll get a ton of tags and everybody
Yeah,
piles on.
Twitter following.
Yeah, he has a, a very strong Twitter sentiment, but then you get to lineup block and it's like, oh, the guy's like 3% owned, right?
Yeah, it seems weird.
So yeah, so how does it work? I mean, the team we have, we work very hard to curate the information. And then we put a lot of consideration into the projections as well, right? Sometimes you have to adjust not just on what the data is telling you, but then what you think people are actually going to do. I think projecting ownership today is different than it was 3 or 4 years ago. People are so sharp now that it's like you can't just take the most tagged guy and say, oh, he's going to be highest owned, right? Because 90% of DFS players are going to look at that and say, oh, I'm not playing Hideki at 25%.
Correct.
And then it ends up.
Yeah, we've also mentioned this the last couple of weeks is people are getting too smart. So then, is your projection system able to recognize the sentiment of the overall industry, knowing now that people are using your site and other people have projected ownership and they're giving it away? Do you take into the fact that, because we say this all the time, like Ricky Fowler at 12%, then he's going to definitely be 18. But if he's at 18, he might be at 12. So do you have that in your system? Like, how can you even do that? Why aren't your projections 100% accurate? What the hell? It's so impossible.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it, right? I mean, you can have a few whales building 500 lineups and they've all got, Ricky Fowler in them, who everybody thought was going to be 12% owned, and he ends up at 20%. There's weather, there's anything. I mean, any little piece of information can come out on Twitter at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and that throws everything off. I mean,
so do you have a way to track the projections? Are you like, tout yourself? I mean, you're pretty close. I mean, like, no one's perfect in this projection stuff because it's literally impossible. Yeah, but you're pretty dang good. I mean, like, I use your site, so I mean, I'm a user and a supporter, so I will definitely advocate. Like, everything's not a perfect science, but you do pretty well. Do you have numbers that prove it?
Yeah, we track the R squared, factor in terms of correlation to actual ownership every week. Historically, that's been anywhere from kind of 0.85 to 0.91, 0.92, depending on the week.
Now, what does that even mean? Does it mean you're 92% accurate, or what R squared?
You had to ask.
No, I don't even know. Do you even know?
We'll just move on.
You're right. I don't really actually care because it's ownership projections, okay? You got to use it the way you can use it. And at the same time, like you said, just because a guy is projected a certain way doesn't mean he's going to end up that way. It doesn't mean that you should use it to not play that guy or use it to play that guy.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's data, right? It's another data point. Traditionally, ownership projecting is going to be probably more accurate than trying to project a guy's actual points, right? Or how many birdies he's going to score, because of the variance in golf. So, the ownership projections are no different than any other projection in the industry, whether it's PGA, NFL, MLB. It's a projection. And, it is based off data, but we cannot ever tell you with 100% certainty what a guy's ownership is going to be, right? It's impossible.
Yeah. So what have you learned, though, from doing this the last few years? Have you learned there's easier projections for higher priced guys in golf? Is it easier to project chalk on the $4,600 running back that just got put in? I mean, do you have like some sort of like idea, like, after learning this for a few years?
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff we've learned. So let's start with, one that often seems to come up is the most expensive golfer in a deep field is rarely the highest owned, right? So even if, let's take DJ in his prime and he's going into Pebble Beach and, he's got the most tags, but he's also the most expensive. But then you've got JT and Brooks and whoever else in the field, right? I mean, 9 times out of 10, DJ as most expensive will not be the highest owned. It's just people will say, well, why would I pay, 12 grand for DJ when I can get JT at 11.2? So that's one. Now, take the flip side of that, which is take the most expensive golfer like a JT in a weak field, and he probably will be the highest owned because he's just so much better than, the rest of the field. So that's one thing I would say. you can probably say with certainty most deep field events, most expensive, will not be highest owned. Secondly is, what I mentioned before, where you got a guy like literally just off the Corn Ferry Tour. He's just out of college, first couple events. I mean, we saw it with Matthew Wolf, first couple events. Everyone's talking about it. Everybody's hyped for him.
Harry Higgs, he kind of came out and was popular randomly all of a sudden because he's like kind of a big guy and the fans like him.
Right. Yeah. So often you'll see these guys get a ton of hype on Twitter, and you just got to know they're not going to be more than 7-8%. Like, no way.
Like if you're living in the Twitter bubble, you are living in the Twitter bubble is what you're saying? Like it's kind of not.
Yeah, and I would say look at historical ownership. Just because a guy's popping off the charts in terms of buzz 1 week, I mean, if he's never been more than 10% owned, he sure as hell isn't going to be 20% owned.
Okay.
So that's the other thing. What else? I mean, just fairly basic, but look for those high upside guys who are just kind of, they're not going to be like single digits, but just under the radar ever so slightly. It's looking for the upside. I mean,
Now, do you ever look back and say, hey, I saw this $6,500 name and he was 15% owned. Do they underperform or overperform? Are you evaluating those things, or is that information accessible on your site?
It is. We have all the data to be able to do that. We're not there yet. I'd love to be able to, build a metric that somehow measured that, because I think it is important. The closest thing to an example I can think of is there's probably been 2 or 3 guys that have done this now, but as the most tagged golfer, which let's say highest owned, for a while had never won a tournament. And then DJ did it, and then he did it again, and then he did it again. I think he'd done it like 4 times. So I was like, well, this is a weird trend. Like, why is DJ the only guy who's just going to go out and, and win as like the absolute chalk? So I'm sure there's something in that data. Like, we have all the historical ownership in DraftKings points for every player going back like 3 years. And you can see with Tony Finau, right? Like often very highly owned.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe his average DraftKings points are going to be less than someone like Jason Day, who's rarely, highly owned, but actually does pretty well on DraftKings most of the time. So yeah, there's a ton of other stuff we'd love to do with that data, because the longer we do this, the more data we have.
No, I've looked back at, who's been $12,000, and your site has that information, which is like one of the only sites I can find that. And I also do the tweets where you're, where are they from, or the college or whatever. Your site has colleges on there. So, I mean, a lot of your stuff, like you can use other than ownership. Is there stuff on your site that's free that if I don't want to pay for it, but I can still get access to information?
Yeah. So we have the news feed, which is where we kind of curate all the links. So we like to consider that kind of like the gateway to DFS content. You can go in there and you can filter all the content by, podcasts, tweets, articles. So depending on, how you like to consume your content. So you can search if you want to look for, fantasy golf pod, just go in there, plug in a search. It'll take you right to, now obviously people are going to have their own curated iTunes feeds anyways with all their pods set up. But if you need to kind of catch up, and just you're sitting there and it's Wednesday night and you're like, where do I start? Just go to the news feed, totally free. You can even see who's buzzing at the top and, trending.
So when you click on a player, this is accessible to the public, right? You click on a player, you can see the tags, right, or not?
You can
see. To pay for that?
So if you click on the player, you'll go to their player profile page, which is a free page as well. And then, you can see everyone in the industry who's mentioned that guy.
So this has been helpful for me to learn new sources. Like I've saw somebody get tagged under a name, and I'm learning that, this Twitter handle is giving information, or this podcast is new to me.
Yeah.
Okay, let me look into it. So I'm learning all the sorts of stuff other than just the projections, which is kind of what your site's known for. Now, let's talk about you quick. Where does this come from? And are you always into fantasy? I know I read on your website in the little about us that your grandpa got you into it at a young age, but tell us your fantasy background a little
Yeah, man. I mean, that was probably my earliest memory, was sitting at the kitchen table with my grandpa, adding up fantasy baseball scores in the newspaper, and I'd help him track his team, and we'd sit there for hours and do that. So yeah, that's always been a part of my life. Later on, and after doing the accounting thing for for a long time, I was like, I just want to try something different. I was always interested in setting up my own business. It was a bit out of left field. I mean, I probably could have started with something a little more relevant to my my professional background. But yeah, always been a huge fantasy guy. I mean, I will say, when I started playing DFS, I was lost. I just didn't know where to start, right? So I'd hop on Twitter. Oh, here's an article from this site or that site. I'd read 4 or 5 articles, then I'd lose money, and then I'd rinse and repeat, right? So,
yeah.
And I just started thinking, there's got to be a better way to do this. And what's the biggest problem a lot of people face in fantasy sports? It's information overload. I mean, how you take all this information and break it down into a more digestible format. So ultimately, that's what we set out to do and what we became.
Okay, so you mentioned you play DFS. Obviously, you have this website, so might as well play. But yeah, what's your process like? How do you play? What do you do?
I would describe it as like a pretty high level process, and fairly simplistic. But for the first thing I'll say is, we spend so much time on the business and on the site that playing and building lineups is secondary to delivering a good product.
That's like what everyone I've talked to has said. Like Rick Run Good's like, by the time Wednesday comes around, I'm like freaking tired. Like all these people, you kind of just go, you know what? I'm here for fun and to learn and do this stuff. But
yeah,
that's why I play for $20. I spent hours looking at this stuff, and I play for $20. So like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So process. I mean, there's a few guys in the industry I will definitely look at. I'm biased, but I'm always looking at Lee Aldrich's article. He writes the Under the Radar article on FanShare, and he tracks all his results, and he's got a pretty impressive track record. I mean, the guy just has a knack for finding these kind of truly under the radar plays. They're not always going to work out. Obviously, it's boom or bust. But I'm always looking at some guys he's picked up on, and I know he's using information from across the industry to.
Well, and he's across the pond too, isn't he? Kind of. Lee Aldrich, DK Golf Bargains on Twitter.
Yeah, so you gotta share DK Golf Bargains. Great guy, and does some great content. So I'll look at who he's recommending. Obviously, I'm going to look at the dashboard and get a feel for ownership. I mean, one data point I've been using more of recently is like the DraftKings top 10 percentage. So if I see a guy getting a lot of buzz and we think he's going to be high owned, but then you look at his past 12 months and you see, oh, this guy's like literally never had a top 10 on DraftKings, or he's hit top 10 on DraftKings like 5% of his tournaments, right? Whereas this other guy who's the same price, he's actually hitting top 10 like 20% of the time. So I'll look at that, factor that in. I'm going to look at, the example I mentioned, the truly elite guys that are just flying under the radar a little bit. So yeah, and then, throw in a few GPP lineups, a cash lineup. Learn the hard way, always put your cash lineup in a GPP. Still have to be reminded, by the guys in the Discord chat to do that. But yeah, so that's it. I mean, I think by the time we get so engrossed in the data, and by the time Wednesday rolls around, you just know who you're going to play. It's not. It doesn't mean you're going to win, but you don't have.
You have a gut feel.
Yeah.
Do you do you ever have a guy that you're just like, this is my guy and I love him, and you're playing him every week? Is there a brand play of yours?
Who's the guy I'm always going to play? I mean, I'm like a lot of people, I'm a sucker for Tiger, right?
For sure. Yes.
Just because you just don't want to be missing out when he wins, right?
Oh God, it's so sad to see him on Sunday and you underweighted yourself on him or whatever, and he's dominating. What about like a discovery of like a low-owned guy, and then you were like, "Wow, my site's telling me this guy's not going to be popular. I'm going to use him," and then he freaking wins. Were you on Patrick Reed the year that he won the Masters and no one else was? I mean, those are the plays. Have you ever had a moment like that?
I actually was on him that year, and I think this came up on Matt Jones' podcast.
Okay.
And I think, looking back at it, I don't remember how much money I won or if I won any money, because I'm sure it probably had him in a 3 for 6 lineup or something. But I did notice, look, Patty Reed's got some pretty good form here, the past kind of 3-4 weeks coming into the Masters. He's looking like he's going to be less than 10% owned. And people at the time, and, he's a bit of a polarizing guy, right? So,
right. Oh, yeah.
So I think there was some edge to be had. But who's another guy? Well, you probably remember when Jason Kokrak went on that run where he was just like, and he wasn't chalk for like the first 2 months he was doing it. So I kept playing him.
Okay.
And then, those are the examples, I guess.
Okay. Now let's go back to FanShare Sports and talk about a little bit more of the FanShare family. You talked about Lee. You have your brother. You mentioned him earlier, Devin, and you co-founded the site. Are you the older brother? Are you the younger brother? Is this your brother-in-law?
I'm the younger brother.
Okay. So I have an older brother, and we, grew up doing this whole thing. So
yeah. So,
one of those things
Devin and I have been around since the beginning. We've been very fortunate to have some, amazing kind of writers and content creators come on board, including Lee, Josh Thomas, who's at DFS up north.
And he's a Minnesotan.
It's another Minnesotan, super sharp guy. He does a lot for DFS Army, and he writes an article, does our course previews. So he's been banging.
Dude, follow him for sure. And then you have you got the man, the ownership guru. Logan.
Well, yeah, Logan. So,
well, how'd you hook up with Logan? He's a sharp guy.
Logan was so he was writing a blog. I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, and I can't remember how I came across his blog. I think it popped up in my Twitter feed or something.
Okay.
And I noticed he mentioned FanShare. He's like, here's a site I use to gauge ownership. And then I noticed he was like, he just seemed really into ownership, and he was doing his own projections, and his writing style just seemed like very analytical. And, turns out he's actually like I can't remember. He went to Cornell, he's
like a stock guy or something. Like he's another financial
he builds valuation models. He basically builds models for a living, right? So we connected on Twitter, and I sort of said, well, do you want to, try and build an ownership model for us? And he did that. And it kind of just, evolved from there. So he built a pretty awesome model for PGA. Yeah. And have you followed, I don't know if you follow at Lunas on Twitter?
Oh yeah. I know Lunas for sure.
Yeah. Lunas is, he's been doing more stuff for us recently. I know, most of his stuff is still just free out there on Twitter right now, but he's always, plugging in some useful sheets into the Discord chat. On the football side, we got some really strong writers as well. Yeah.
So what's up? What's next? I mean, now that are you doing things to update the site while we're under quarantine, or are you kind of just waiting it out? Have you made any improvements? Have thought about new ads?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're doing a little bit of the outlaw content.
Nice.
I don't think Lee can stay away, right? He needs to write that golf content. So he's doing under the radar.
Yeah, I need that.
And yeah, we are working on some new features. As I mentioned earlier, we got a ton of data, just historical data that we have at our fingertips, and we're going to package it up and put that on the site and build some new tools around it. A lot of it's going to be focused on ownership and, what ownership means at different venues, in different field strengths and that type of thing. So keep an eye out for that.
What about Euro?
Yeah, we don't have Euro. I mean, there's so much stuff we could add. The development pipeline, Chad's got like 100 things in it.
Right, of course, everyone, yeah.
It's like, you want to add so much all the time, but adding a new feature is actually like, it's kind of a big deal because first you got to, develop it, then you got to test it, and then you're going to get questions about it. So it's a constant feedback loop. But yeah, I don't think we've ever gone more than 2 or 3 months without adding something new to the site, which is something I'm proud of. It's always evolved, and it literally started as a single tweet. Wednesday night before the majors, I would get on Twitter and say, here's the top 10, most discussed guys on FanShare. And there was no discussion. This was just
this is you and Devin. You and Devin just talking to each other.
Yeah. And then it became,
that's how it works.
That's how it works. I think it became a PowerPoint slide after that. Then it became, a page on the website, and then multiple pages. And so, yeah, it never ends.
Well, I use it. I find it valuable every single week. I'm on it. If we want to sign, you can go use it right now without any membership fee, right? You can like play around with it.
Go check it out. The dashboards are still up there for the Players Championship. I don't think you can use the lineup generator right now, but once we kind of get back online and closer to June, we're going to open that up for a little bit so anybody can go in and use it.
Well, if I want to sign up and I want access to this ownership projection stuff, what's it cost me, and how do I pay for it?
Yeah, so just go to fansharesports.com, check out the FanShare Pro membership options. I think the monthly golf subscription's $24.95 or $9.95, if you want to check it out for a week. I think we're going to probably end up offering a 1 week free trial once things come back online.
Okay.
You can get an annual sub as well, which includes football. So yeah, we're going to be.
I will vouch for this website. I've used it for football. I've used it for golf. Again, I'm going to tell you, like, it doesn't give you any answers. It's not going to give you the exact projections of anybody, but at least you're going to get more information. And this information isn't an analysis by paralysis information. This is just what it is. So take it for building lineups. You want to make a unique lineup? Well, then don't use all 20% guys. It's like, that's obvious stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of just say to people, like, it's there. Why not use it, right? To gauge ownership.
This is exactly like Fantasy National, where Moose is like, we're not telling you what to do with this information. It's just information that you can play with. And it's great. And it really does help. And in a way, if you don't have access to this information and you're not using this information, you're at a disadvantage in the game of DFS.
I like to think so. I mean, what I hate to see on Twitter is people guessing at ownership, because, sometimes you'll see comments.
I've been guilty of that before, but I'll tag you. I'll be like, I'm not FanShare.
Yeah, but I don't think you're guessing, Chad. I think you're making very educated guesses. But like, sometimes you'll just see someone say, "Oh, feels like this guy's really under the radar," and you're like, "No, he's not.
No, he's not.
He's like super popular."
Right.
Just check it out, right? So, we need to do a better job of communicating the value, giving people a chance to check it out. I think that's a constant challenge for any business. It's like the people that use it, they love it. I mean, you're saying,
if anybody hasn't signed up and is curious about this stuff and is wondering if it's helpful, DM me. I will tell you exactly what I think and how it's helped me. I've won 2 GPPs using this information. Okay. Or I didn't win. I got 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 7th or something like that, but I won $1,000 using his site, FanShareSports.com. So go and sign up. Again, Andrew, thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time.
This was fun. Let's do it again.
Absolutely.
Cheers, dude.
Do it again. Thanks, man.